Thanks for your company here on Joy News Desk. Now, this morning we heard of a suicide at a Penkwa close to Achimota. On Wednesday, a level 400 student at the University of Ghana jumped to her death. 2 days ago, 15-year-old killed herself at Achim New Tafo in the eastern region. Now, we'll start off with a Penkwa. Maxwell Agbagba was at the scene this morning.
This is the scene where the incident happened. Tied to this tree here is the rope that the deceased used in committing the act. You can actually see his flip-flops right here on the ground here. But some residents that we've been speaking to here believe that he was murdered and possibly dumped here. Their suspicions are rife because they say this rope is too thin. And as of the time that they came here, they said his legs were actually on the ground. So they believe that a suspect was murdered somewhere, and this was done to portray or put across an act of suicide. It is not in our place to state what exactly the cause is. The Tesano police have come for the body, and investigations will commence very soon. Reporting for Joy News, Maxwell Agbagba.
And in the eastern region, a 15-year-old Barbara Ama Asante, junior high school pupil of Childhood Preparatory School at Achimosiem, she's committed suicide. According to the mother of the deceased, Mercy Asari, her daughter was found hanging in the kitchen at 2:30 p.m. The police was later notified, and after taking inventories at the crime scene, they deposited the body at the morgue whilst investigation continues. The deceased would have turned 16 in July this year. Earlier this morning, I spoke to Mark Dakwa, an uncle of the deceased.
2 months time no
Barbara was living with her father in Isiakwa and moved to New Tafu 2 months ago to live with her mom. She said she didn't want to live with her father again. About 2 weeks ago, she told her mom she was having dreams, seeing someone killing her or burying herself. Her mom was scared and rebuked her for saying these things. She repeated a dream to her yesterday and was rebuked. Then she picked up a book and said she was going to study in the kitchen. Her mother was asleep when she received a call and stepped outside to answer it. When she went to the kitchen, her daughter had hanged herself. Barbara is quite an introvert, and it would be difficult to tell if something was bothering her. Quite recently, she also had an attitude of picking up a book or Bible randomly to go and preach. At times, she had quote scriptures and speak as though there was someone before her, when in actual fact, she was alone.
Well, in the studio this morning with me is psychologist and award-winning suicidologist, Dr. Joseph Osafo. Now, Dr. Osafo has received the Dio Leo Fund Award, an award for distinguished scholars in recognition of their outstanding research on suicidal behaviors carried out in developing countries. Currently, he teaches guidance and counseling and psychology of religion, sports psychology, psychology for national development, and social psychology in society. Welcome to News Desk, Dr. Osafo.
Thank you.
Now, I mean, quite recently we've been hearing this in the news. I mean, for the past 2 weeks, and even in a matter of 2 days, we've had of 3 suicides. What will push someone to take suicide as an escape route?
Well, there's so many reasons for which somebody thinks, I want to die, or living is not worth it. I'm better off dead than alive. Let me just hasten to add that usually when somebody wants to die, you cannot, for example, isolate a single reason. You may have ideas as to why the person might have killed himself or herself. If you are lucky to have a note left, for example, then you can actually use the reason. Or if the person survived the attempt, okay, then you can talk to the person. But at least first is a multidimensional malaise. That is supposed to mean that there are several factors that may coalesce, okay, together and make the person suicidal. Let me just identify some of them or mention some of them that we have at least discovered in our studies for the past 8 years. One is that, let's start with adolescents. Educational stresses are becoming problematic in Ghana. And so if the child, for example, is looking forward to enter into any of these perceived, privileged courses, I want to become a pharmacist, a doctor, engineer, a lawyer, and he didn't get a pass mark. And you know what happens to our kids when they are leaving the secondary school to the university? If you don't get your math, at least you get a pass in math and English and core science. And if you don't get it, you are in trouble. That has been found to be associated with suicidal behavior. Again, we found bullying, and this is something that happens in the secondary school. I don't know where you school, but in most secondary schools in Ghana, if you got there, your seniors are going to, deal with it. It's like a tradition. You'll come there and you are manhandled, you are bullied, and it's supposed to be part of the popular culture in school. I mean, everybody who gets to first year should know that you would go through this kind of challenge. That has also been found to be associated with this behavior. Again, feelings of loneliness and neglect. Then you have those who have conflictual relationships with their parents, and they will tell you, my mom doesn't care about me, my dad doesn't care about me, they are all the time abusing me, insulting me. Remember, adolescence is a turbulent stage. When you get there, you get a rush of thoughts on your mind as to who you are, whether you're an adult or a child. Now, I had some of them asking me, I don't know what I feel, but I feel I'm an adult. If he's an early maturer, quite giant, broad-chested, breaking voice, and he feels that he's already a man. And so they may run into troubles with their parents who may think that they are still kids, and you have to be managed, you have to be controlled. They may, for example, run into problems with their parents because the parents aren't very confident with the way they are relating with the opposite sex, for example. Parents are not confident the way they are relating with their own friends. Their peers are influencing them. They may be afraid that they may get themselves involved in using illicit drugs and stuff like that. And so they run into real problems with their parents, and they often don't have anybody to talk to. Some may speak to their friends who may think, well, it's better I die. And in Japan, it's a problem now. It's called net suicide. So adolescents who find themselves in such troubles may share with their colleagues that I'm looking forward to somebody who may want to die with me, And then you have cases where the person is depressed or maybe is diagnosed with a real mental problem. Sometimes people don't know. When I listen to the story, I don't know
this young girl, Barbara,
I mean, you are likely to think that there might be some mental illness there that you didn't know. Sometimes when some of such mental illness, presents as some religious behaviors,
And I want us to touch on that aspect, on how we deal with some of these issues and signs in terms of knowing if someone is suicidal or has the tendency to get suicidal. But let's talk about the rate of suicide in Ghana. Do we know what the rate is currently?
Unfortunately, we don't. We can only be making references to crude statistics.
Okay.
I mean, I've seen, for example, some time ago, there was this report of about 1,500 we have been quoted.
Yes, that was in 2016.
Those are crude statistics. They are not, we cannot trust them, but at least somebody is trying to just monitor what is happening. A police report some time ago, which was we had access to, for example, between 2026 and 2006 and 2008, for example, indicated some numbers, but that about 280 something. And then other crude statistics. We don't have it. And the reason is very simple. So we don't have a national policy on suicide that will, for example, give us the guide in capturing data. As of now in the hospitals, we may not, or we don't even have recording suicide as a cause of death. Okay? You may have it bundled together when you have this DHS report of reporting on, let's say, homicide. Okay. So violent death, accident, and let's say homicide and whatnot, all put together. How do you know, for example, which percentage is actually suicide? So we don't have a national policy on suicide, and that's something we seriously need to take note of. And so the point is that what may be happening could just be a tip of the iceberg. Whatever we have heard people say and then numbers that are flying in the air could just be the tip of the iceberg. From where I sit, and some studies that we pretty soon will be putting out there, I'll point to me that suicide can be described as a major public health issue in Ghana. It's no doubt at all. And in our secondary schools, we will come out with some report you will see. In our secondary schools, that is becoming a problem. When you have a suicidal thought, it may not lead to a plan to die, and that may not also lead to attempt. But people may go through crisis, and the crises are quite acute. So sometimes when you go through acute crisis, three things are likely to happen. So either the person is helped, or maybe the crisis cools off by some other means that we don't know, or the person dies. So what we need to do is to look around for people who may be showing signs of distress.
All right, before we go into looking out for the signs, you know, earlier you mentioned Japan and the fact that they have a very high suicide rate, and that sometimes someone will be looking for someone who would want to die with them. Is it that people who are suicidal usually are looking for a mentor, for lack of a better expression, or someone to lead the way, you know, to sort of get inspired to do it?
We've in our studies, one of the things we have found is that sometimes suicidality is actually a means of communicating intentions. Sometimes people want to simply tell you, hey, I'm dying, just watch here. But what we find in Ghana is this, you know, is a prescriptive culture. It's a culture where when people are going through challenges and they tell you these are the challenges and difficulties I'm going through, you are likely to be maligned, insulted, abused. The reasons you put out there are likely to be, you know, trivialized. I mean, you have ever heard somebody says that, this kind of, you know, talk. When somebody is in suicidal crisis, usually there's a pain. The pain cannot be described as a physical pain. Maybe the best of describing it is a soulish pain. It's a pain of the soul. People often are wondering, what at all will make you
want to kill yourself?
Want to kill yourself? I mean, how? But another point is, so they are in a pain that cannot be actually experienced by others, and others cannot, for example, understand and appreciate what kind of pain is that. Is it physical? And if you talk to attempt survivors and you listen to their narratives, you will appreciate this. The pain is not physical. It's a pain of the soul. The other point to emphasize here is that usually, because they may be in crisis, their options or the time to sit down and to think through, that option is constricted. It's called what we call constriction. So they are unable to generate various, if you like, options for why I shouldn't die. Okay, so don't be insulting the person. Can't you think this way? No, there's constriction. The person cannot generate other possible reasons why he or she should live or should die. And so because of such constrictions, you're likely to hear somebody say, no, I feel the best way of ending this pain is an escape. So suicide often becomes an escape. And for those, in Japan, for example, those who are looking forward to others to join them, may put up a note on the social media. I've been going through this and going through that. Is anybody going through a similar challenge? And you get a lot of these youth writing in there, yes, I have the, yeah. Okay, can we go together? It does happen. Usually, sometimes a part of them wants to leave, a part wants to die. If you are lucky to come across somebody who wants to die, for example, one of the things you can do is to ask them straight away, are you thinking of harming yourself? Are you thinking of dying? That is not supposed to mean that you are pushing that idea on them and that you want them to rather go ahead. No, you rather are helping them to open up.
Let's talk about gender. Does it play a role in suicidal thoughts, or I mean, does gender have anything to do with suicide or thinking about it?
It's interesting, but what we have often heard is that when somebody says, okay, so a young lady says, I want to die, they say, oh, she's joking. Well, studies in Ghana and across the world, you know, do reveal that women are more likely to attempt. Various reasons have been postulated for why that happens. One of them is that women often are nurturant. They are not that aggressive risk takers, and so women are likely to, you know, be using suicide as a way of seeking for attention. Another reason is that as a nurturer, they are not likely to use, for example, very lethal weapons, and so they may not die in the attempt. But it's quite different for men. And some other reasons have also been put forward for that. And one of those reasons is that for men, because of the abundance of testosterone, is a hormone that is actually implicated in aggression. Men often become aggressive, and so they are likely to use lethal weapons. But another thing is quite interesting, which is cultural. When you come to Ghana, we have certain ethno-philosophical themes. For example, you often hear people say that a man drinks a bitter medicine, be a man. A man must have a heavy heart. So sometimes men would want to prove that cultural label of masculinity. They want to show others that I am the man and I must go. Okay. There are others who will tell you that this is my third attempt. And in fact, if somebody has attempted, there are chances that he or she will go. So if you have already had a history of attempt, you're likely to go. One of the things we have to do quickly is that when you know somebody who has attempted, you don't attempt to rather
condemn.
Condemn, that's right. You don't say okay, that's say you want to kill us. Okay,
just
die.
Do it.
We just want to go. When you do that, you rather dare them. And they may impulsively, and impulsively simply means that their reason may bypass, their decision may bypass reason, rather. It becomes a bit more of emotions.
All right, let's talk about this, because you're saying that women are likely to attempt suicide more than men. So how often do we see the issue of love gone sour suicide in terms of, I like the smile on your face in terms of, in terms of, relationship issues for young ladies, growing up, or even older women who cannot handle, for example, divorce or the shame of it. How often do we hear the issues of love gone sour suicide?
And that is, just yesterday, one of our students who is pursuing a PhD in looking at prenatal mental health, for example, the presence of mental illness among mothers who are pregnant. And she shared some of the findings. A good number of them are suicidal, for example. Some are thinking of even killing themselves and killing their kids.
Why is that?
Okay, so women report a lot of distress in marriages. In one of the studies that we've just done, which we are yet to publish, women have reported a lot of distress leading to divorce. So in Ghana, we have also discovered that women in Ghana report romantic crisis, for example. It could be young people right from GHS or even primary school to adults. And that can be explained in terms of how the various genders, I mean men and women, how they explain, love issues, sexuality and all that. Women are quite relational. They are quite nurturant. Women will make a decision on sex based on one single fact. I gave myself to him because I love him. Men may look at sex as an act. It's part of something that should naturally happen when I'm in love with you.
And that's why it's more distressing for women when relationships
end. So for a woman,
end.
it's so distressing because it's quite difficult for a woman to really disentangle what love is from giving herself to you. So when a woman says that, okay, I love him so much and so I wanted to go to bed with it, the woman has actually naked her emotions. Her life is open up to the person, and so they feel really, really abused. You've even heard young women saying that he fooled me. Technically speaking, if the sexual union was not a false one, which would have qualified for a rape, it was consensual. So why would the woman say you fooled me? It's because women attach lovemaking or sexuality as part of what their whole concept of love. And so when that is broken, it's so painful. It's really difficult to really disentangle what love is from that. And by the time the woman says, I give myself to him, the woman has opened up. Some research even shows that men often enter into a love relationship with one leg in and one on the other side. But women will just enter in fully. I mean, both leg in the arena of love and they're just swimming. And so they're likely to be hit. And don't forget that all around the world, there's been report that women often get more depressed than men. They are a bit more emotional. The emotional root in women is more louder than that of men.
So this is it. I'm getting this from what you're saying, that the regret of having opened up to this man and he eventually walking away is what leads them into states of depression and eventually suicide.
So it may lead to distress. Initially, the person may be distressed, for example, and he or she, she is thinking of, why did this happen to me? What did I do wrong? Sometimes they're struggling for days to understand why somebody came up here. I mean, I opened up myself to the person. We were just together. Everything was fine. And suddenly, the person says that, I don't love you again.
Could it also be the issue of being disappointed in themselves? You know, why did I allow myself? Why couldn't I have seen the signs, for example? Is it a thing of beating themselves to death?
Yeah, that is, like, if you like, a corollary to that. I mean, usually, when you feel that you're having food, definitely you go to these self-deprecating thoughts. You know, you have a sense of guilt, and then you focus so much on yourself. This automatic thought of you haven't done well, you have been fooled, you know, keep repetitively hitting your mind. And so if you don't get help in that, then you may progress to a mental, you know, disorder like depression, for example, anxiety disorders and others. So, I mean, we have found a very strong association between romantic crisis and suicidality among women.
Let's still touch a bit on the postnatal stress. How well are we doing as a country? I mean, sometimes, for example, sometime last year we heard the news of a woman who actually kills her children after she's delivered of them. I mean, aside having problems in the marriage, what could, you know, put a woman in this state after having a baby, which a lot of people consider a gift and a blessing?
It's quite interesting, and maybe to start, let's even start from the prenatal time, because that's what we our studies are showing. Whilst they are still pregnant, women get so distressed. And some of the reasons that we found, some of them will tell you they have men who are irresponsible. They have abusive men, for example. You talk to them about, I need to go and see the doctor. He says, well, I don't have money. And in one of the narratives, she says that, and you open your mouth and say, why? You have to get money for me to go, and he beat you up. I mean, that's a woman who was just narrating this. He beat you up. There was one instance, she was saying that, I went to see my doctor, and they saw that I was bleeding. And they asked me why. I said, well, I slept, but actually I was beaten up by my husband. It's abuse. That's one. The abuse leads to a lot of mental distress, which goes unnoticed. And again, some women have this particular feeling of protecting their husbands. They want to protect their homes. They don't want people to know that this is what is happening, especially if they are in churches. It's worse. They don't want the pastor to know. They don't want the elder to know. They don't want the church leader to know, so they will keep it. So, and then that progresses, and a child is born. Usually we are happy, oh, a child is born, but birth comes with challenges. It comes with financial demands. It comes with making adjustments, you know, parenting and all that. And so there are several factors coalescing in there that may, for example, lead to even depression after childbirth. And if they don't get help, then there's a problem.
And that's why I'm sure it makes suicide a very complex issue to deal with. But,
very complex.
But I want you to help me with this, Doc. What will I find in the mind of somebody contemplating suicide?
You may find in the person a loss of existential meaning. And that is to say that, for example, the person cannot find his bearing in life. I mean, a young man, 24, 16, 17, tells you that what is life? I feel I'm a burden. I feel I have no meaning in life. And that is serious. Loss of meaning in life is serious. You find that in the suicidal mind. You may find a suicidal mind feeling burdened, that I'm a burden to my parents. I feel that my other siblings are better than myself. You may also find them unable to, for example, generate options in solving their problems. So when you ask them, have you thought about doing this? No. Why? Well, I don't know. It's difficult for them to really generate options. If a child says, I want to do medicine, and did not, for example, qualify to get into medical school, there are other things the child can do. So one of the things we're going to ask them, have you thought about other things? Well, I haven't thought. It's medicine. It's either I get medicine or I die. So they may be constricted mentally in generating options. You may find hopelessness in the suicidal mind. And in fact, let me just add this. The infusion of hope is so powerful.
Okay.
And this is where pastors are needed. This is where our pulpit should be turned into messages of hope. We need to preach hope to our young men who are unemployed. In fact, in one of the studies that will be published pretty soon, we found a strong association between unemployment and suicidality in Ghana. And it's becoming a problem, not only in Ghana, but even generally in low and middle income countries. So suicide is becoming more of a psychosocial issue than a typical psychiatric condition where one will say that the person died is because of depression. In fact, let me hasten to add, all over the world, people have thought that when you are depressed, you kill yourself. But recent studies report otherwise. There are number of people, numbers, I mean thousands, who are depressed, and yet they don't end killing themselves.
Doc, I know a story of a lady who was actually sacked from school for not meeting a certain cut-off point, and she actually got really suicidal. The shame, you know, dealing with this. I entered university with all my friends, and then in my third year, you can imagine, just a year to go, and she's asked to leave the school because she couldn't make 0.01 of a certain cut-off point. Sometimes you're asked to defer a course, you're asked to stop doing a course. Can we have a way to deal with these issues? I mean, for example, in this 0.1 case, as if you were a counselor in the school, what could you probably advise the authorities to do, or what advice would you give to such a person? I mean, I'm raising all this because you're talking about options in the educational sector.
That's a difficult one, but let's walk through one after the other. So let's say you are in the university, a few things should come to play for us to think through this. One is, who are we dealing with? Who is this person? Who is this girl? She has a history of attempts. Definitely, if she hasn't been able to make the 0.5 or whatever, and she comes over to talk to me, I would want to see the authorities, because she has a history. And so the history might have even hampered her performance, academic performance. That's possible. But when you talk that way, you also have to look at the other side, that students generally, we should have discipline, and we should have a way of determining who is doing what. I mean, discriminating between performance, between students, and say that is a good student, that one is average, that one needs to come up a little bit. So students will also have to sit up and study. I guess what we need to do is to let our kids understand in life that the struggles in life are not permanent. The difficulty we have, and I have worked in this for at least, having practiced for about 14 years as a psychologist, students often will rush, impulsively take decisions. I am not good. Such globalized way of thinking, or they may have some perfectionistic thought. Is either I get an A or I have failed. There are others who can, for example, manage a C or a B plus or a D minus.
But Doc, is it not too much expectation sometimes from parents? Because for some of the students, they've been made to believe that it's an A or nothing. In this family, you make an A or nothing. And so they're walking around with that, you know, high expectation hanging around their necks. They don't have an option.
Definitely. That's one of the problems. And so as parents, one of the things we do is that, and I have a problem here with parents who may not be too good when they were equally in school. They may be trailing when they were in school. They may be below even average. And here they are putting all pressure on their kids.
Yeah, probably because they've seen where their results have got them.
We know intelligence can have a genetic link.
Sure.
I mean, so if you are not very intelligent when we're growing up, please
don't expect your children to be super intelligent.
A bit empathic and help your child. But a child can through discipline and help acquire, you know, some other better ways, you know, of learning. But let's quickly add this point. And so in some of the schools, I know that there's pressure on students. What I have seen, at least having been teaching for the past 12 years in the University of Ghana, is that there are some students who will wait. They will wait to pile up their notes. Students don't know how to learn. They don't know how to distribute, you know, the load over a period of time. So they're waiting. You attend lectures today, tomorrow, next, and they are still piling up the notes. And they are waiting for a time to just, you know, get into the library and pile up their books and they say, let me just break everything. It doesn't work that way. You put undue pressure on you. What happens to you on that day of exams if you fall ill? You can write the paper. So I think that it's a mix of so many things. We need to do some psycho-education for our students to understand some of the challenges in life and how to address them. And authorities also need to understand that we need to be a bit more careful in the extent to which we put pressure on students. Parents need to be a bit more careful with what we expect from our students as well.
And that brings me to my next question. Let's talk about the facilities that are available to help such students in universities or even in high schools, because you mentioned that the adolescent period is a very turbulent period. Now, this is the case where sometimes you don't even have a certified counselor in a school. It's probably a pastor who's been given that position. And for many students, and I have spoken to a young man from KNUST who actually had suicidal thoughts. The fear is that the pastor will be preaching about you the next Sunday. He may not mention your name, but, you know, sitting in the congregation, you are feeling a bit uncomfortable. The avenues to address some of these things, like you mentioned, some people come from homes, there's a lot of pressure. They just need somebody to talk to. They may not be able to confide in their family or their friends. What is happening with our systems? How effective are they? And looking at qualified persons even doing these jobs, are we failing our students by denying them some of these opportunities?
Generally, mental health in Ghana is saddled with a lot of difficulties. It's underfunded, it's understaffed. We have taken only biomedical and physical health. So when you are sick, just go and see your doctor, and then you do a few tests, you are prescribed some medication, and you're okay. But people have various forms of distress, mental distress, emotional challenges. And so I think that we need to develop, scale up mental health services a little bit, in Ghana generally. And most hospitals will have to have, places for psychologists, for counselors to be there. And so this should be decentralized into our schools, into the communities. We have several communities without psychologists. We have a lot of schools without psychologists. And we think that people can make it in life by just seeing the medical doctor. The medical doctor works on your physique. And the psychologist and the counselor, maybe the psychiatrist, will be much more concerned about your emotions, about your thought processes and how they affect you. So we need to, globally, on the global scale, as a nation, really have a policy and push. I know the mental health policy is out now. I think that we still are waiting for the airlines, so we need to push that. But let's come to some of the practical issues. In some of the schools, we may have counseling and placement centers, but they are not proactive. We're waiting for the kids to come. Come. And when people are going through crisis, remember, if it's suicide, they want to die. So why would they come? You have to pursue after them. You have to go out there in some latitudes where people have attempted to, work and reduce suicide. They have had, for example, to even train all teachers to spend some time in sport.
Exactly.
You find a child in a classroom suddenly withdrawn, bothered, crying all the time, not excited again, sometimes very aggressive and irritable. You just get close to the child and you can hold the child's arm and say, let's go here. We don't do that. In our university, and I commend some of our students who will, for example, hold the hand of their friend. And they bring them to me and say, I think my friend has a problem. And they have received help. So we need to be each other's keeper. We have to be careful with these negative attitudes that we have. We all the time condemn people. We trivialize the reasons for why they are going through crisis. We need to stop that. When somebody opens up his mind or her mind and tells you that, I feel like dying, your job is to say, what is the problem? How can I help you? Don't say, okay, die, go to hell. We need to change our attitude.
All right, Doc.
We have to do more of psychoeducation.
Talking about sporting, having to teach sport reminds me of a story in my church. And the Sunday school teacher actually saw this young boy withdrawn and contacted a psychiatrist in the church. And eventually it turned out there was no food. His father had lost his job and they couldn't, the home had gone into a stage of, well, lack of a better expression, bankruptcy. They didn't have any money. And it was affecting this young boy. So it's very important that we spot some of these things. But how do we do it? How do I spot, for example, in this office, if I have a friend who's having a challenge, a psychological, emotional challenge, what should I look out for? How do I spot it and how can I help?
First, we have to develop this sense of empathy. Now, empathy is that feeling of, it's often labeled in, if you like, non-professional parlance as sympathy, you know. That feeling that, let me check on that person. Let me find out what is happening to the person. And for those who may be checked upon, they should also open up. If somebody walks into your life and say, oh, hello, how are you? Are you fine? Just don't feel, why are you prying into my life? That's my privacy. I don't want it.
Answer the cliche,
That's
fine,
right.
yeah.
So just open up and share. Sometimes people don't because they are not too sure how to be handled. There are others who hear your stories and the next day is in the media, is there, and so they don't want it.
But Doc, my question, I mean, I'm just trying to, you know, help somebody maybe in their family at home. What are the signs? I mean,
so that's where I'll just get into. So there are a few things to do. So I said first, it's an attitudinal change. We need to have an open mind, be empathic. You can see the sign, but if you are just judgmental, you will not approach it. So that's the first point. Change your mentality and be empathic. The second thing is that look out for the following signs. You can see these signs in their emotions. For example, if the person is withdrawn, withdrawn, maybe crying for a long time, wailing and weeping for days, okay, the person is not excited again, nothing exciting. If it's a friend, you used to go out there, hang around over the weekend with friends, and suddenly you call the person and says, I'm not interested. Why? Well, it's okay. The person can be in the room for a long time. What are you doing? I'm not doing anything. You have to go and check on the person. There are others who may tell you that they want to travel. They may sound very metaphorical. I've missed God. I want to travel. I want to go somewhere. I want to go far away that nobody, will get to know where I am. These are signs. There are others, for example, it could be your partner, your friend, and drives recklessly these days. You wonder how he negotiates case and that's overtaking, and you wonder, why are you driving this way? You need to ask, is anything eating up your mind? And there are others who may go, for example, and buy, some very little substances and weapons. I have had somebody telling me that a young boy came here and said he wants to buy DDT. It's an agreement. And I asked, what did you ask? He said, well, I give it. What? How can? A young boy about 12 years. You can do that. How can a 12-year-old boy get to a shop and say, I want a DDT, and it is sold? You don't do that. You ask, be inquisitive, find out what the person wants to do with that. It's very key. And if they are, the person is a child, lives with the mom. He's safe with the dad and mom, and all of a sudden is looking for, rope here and there. Sometimes he's watching around. He wants to see what, it's as if he's thinking somebody's watching. These are all signs. And when they open up plainly, that should be the best time to just seek help for them. The exact time when they say, I feel like dying. Okay. Everything is out now. Okay. So you
seek professional help.
Straight away.
Sure. And not try to, how sometimes we get in this country, maybe trying to give an advice or two.
No, but that can be helpful. Okay. You may be far away from reach, in some village, how can you bring the person all the way to Accra seeking for help? You can. In seasonality, it's very simple. You can just infuse hope in the person.
Infusing hope.
It works.
That's the key word.
It works.
But Doc,
infuse hope.
With all the news that we are hearing now, is it time for a national conversation on this matter?
In fact, it's long overdue. In 2012, we presented a petition to Parliament to consider decriminalizing attempted suicide. Well, we didn't hear what happened. We still are pushing. We've done a series of training for the police officers. We've done training for students. We've done training for nurses. We've done training, for a group of people, religious leaders, for example. What we're trying to do is to disseminate knowledge so that people are empowered on what to do and what to look out for. But I guess that it is overdue, it's long overdue. We need a national policy on suicide prevention. We need to have a system where we can capture data and use that in preparing document on what to do in our schools, what to do in our communities, what to do in our hospitals, and what to do in areas where people may be experiencing, distress and may need intervention early enough.
Thank you very much for your time, Dr. Joseph Osafo. I've been speaking to him. He's a psychologist and award-winning suicidologist, and he says suicide is a major public health problem, and suicide often becomes an escape for people who are hurting. He adds we need a national policy to deal with this matter. You're watching Joy News Desk with me, Bernice Abubed. We'll bring you more stories right after this.